2010年国际金融投资博览会于12月9日在上海浦东举行。本次博览会由加拿大环球财经集团和浦东新区归国留学人员联合会主办。会议主办方盛邀2004年诺贝尔经济学奖得主爱德华·普雷斯科特、美国知名经济学家罗伯特巴洛、浦东新区金融服务局副局长、经济学博士董勤发和中国社会科学院金融研究所所长王国刚等经济界人士举行专题演讲。来自国内外金融经济和相关领域的人士参加了此次会议。在会议期间，东方财经的财富对话栏目有幸邀请到2位重量级的经济学家，对当前中国经济乃至全球经济等焦点问题进行了深入的专题访问。
1944年，罗伯特·巴罗出生于美国纽约市。1965年毕业于加州理工学院，获物理学学士学位。1970年，他以通货膨胀、支付期与货币需求一文顺利通过答辩，获得哈佛大学经济学专业的哲学博士学位。他是美国艺术与科学院院士、美国经济学会副主席，他还是美国国民经济研究局研究员、布鲁金斯研究所高级顾问。他获得过众多荣誉和奖项，包括著名的亚当斯密奖。他的宏观经济学已再版5次，被译成6国文字，是许多国家宏观经济学的首选教材。罗伯特·巴罗还是商业周刊特约评论员和华尔街日报的长期撰稿人，现为哈佛大学瓦格纳经济学讲座教授，同时担任斯坦福大学胡佛研究所高级研究员。罗伯特·巴罗先生在与会期间接受了东方财经的专访，他谈及了全球经济的现状以及美国和欧洲如何深陷经济危机，更特别提及了全球性的通胀，并给予了中国政府他所认为的解决方式。当然，罗伯特·巴罗先生也对美国自身问题的复杂性进行了一番剖析，对中美2国各自执行的货币政策进行了对比。他一再强调了人民币升值符合中国利益，中国目前面临着通货膨胀问题，而人民币升值将有助于解决这一问题。接下来，我们就来听听罗伯特·巴罗先生是如何阐述他的观点的。
Could you please describe the current world economy and USA economy?
I think there are a lot of economic difficulties in the rich countries, such as the United States or Western Europe, coming out of the financial crisis and recession, and it's still a lot of uncertainties about how well the economic growth is going to be, and dealing with the problems of the governments in terms of their fiscal situations. I think it's very challenging, and it's a lot of uncertainty about when economic growth will be resumed. I wanted to give some of my thoughts today about the ongoing global financial crisis and recession, and particularly comment about some of the government policies that have been put forward as a way to try to improve matters and get out of the recession environment. I thought I would start with just a few remarks about the origin of the financial crisis in the United States. People thought it was zero probability that the housing market would ever show an average price decline on a nationwide basis in the U.S., that nobody ever thought it was possible that house prices would fall very much, or in particular fall by 20 to 30%, which is what actually happened during the crisis. So because people thought that that event was zero probability, I think that reflected a lot of the financial arrangements and contracts that were made in the years preceding the crisis. And this particularly became an issue along with the innovations that had occurred in the financial sector in terms of new kinds of securitization, such as mortgage-backed securities and related kinds of instruments. So the combination of the idea that house prices couldn't fall on a national average basis with the new kinds of securities really magnified the extent of the problem, in particular when it turned out that housing prices did decline in a way that nobody had anticipated. So I think these are important ingredients in the initiation of the financial crisis, which I think started in the United States. But I think it's important to realize that this underlying mistake is now well understood by players in the financial markets. Nobody, again, is going to create all these new instruments with mysteriously AAA rated securities based on poor credit mortgages. Now that it's understood that you can have these kinds of problems in the housing market, and particularly you can have house price declines of something like 20 to 30%. So since this mistake is not going to be repeated again, it's probably not going to be that helpful.
But what's your opinion on the Fed's QE2?
I think this recent round of announced quantitative easing is not going to have very much impact on the U.S. economy, given that particularly nominal interest rates are already close to zero. It shouldn't have much effect. I think it does make more difficult the problem of the so-called exit strategy, which is when the economy finally starts doing better and interest rates become higher, how the central bank is going to avoid inflation. The inflation is not so much a near-term problem, but it's a prospective problem, particularly in terms of withdrawing the tremendous infusion of liquidity. So I think this new round of expansion does raise concerns about longer-term inflation. According to the bond markets, it doesn't look like it's a big problem, because if you factor out expected inflation coming from the bond markets, say 5 years into the future or some such, it looks like it's only about 2.5% per year, possibly a little higher than you would want, but it's nothing dramatic. So I'm a little surprised at the extent of the reaction from China and some other places to this recent monetary policy. I think it's probably a mistake, but I don't think it's that important. So the current plan, announced some time ago by the Federal Reserve, is this so-called QE2, second round of quantitative easing, which is focused on buying not more long-term mortgage-backed securities, but rather long-term U.S. government bonds. The plan is mainly to buy those rather than short-term Treasury bills. Now, since nominal interest rates on short-term bills are already close to zero, my prediction is that this quantitative easing won't do anything much to the U.S. economy. I don't expect it to have any important effects on the real GDP or employment. And in fact, the policy is exactly equivalent to having the Treasury itself shift to a shorter maturity for its debt financing. So you're going to accomplish the fact, if the Fed buys up a lot of long-term bonds, you're going to end up with a lot more short-term stuff being held by households and less long-term, because the Federal Reserve will be holding more of the long-term bonds. But the U.S. Treasury can do the same thing in its debt operation by funding itself with more short-term securities like Treasury bills and less in the way of long-term bonds. So I don't know why the Federal Reserve is going into this business, which is a natural business of the fiscal authority, which is in fact the Treasury. But in addition, I think changing the maturity structure of the outstanding government debt is not going to be very important. It's not going to have any major effects on the level of economic activity.
But you know, as you mentioned, inflation, now we are facing very difficult situation about the inflation. Now you see the Central Bank of China is tightening monetary policy.
Right.
Yeah. And the Central Bank of Fed is easing money.
Right.
So it's very difficult to see how to, solve the difference of the monetary policy and how to affect the economy.
But I think the core problem there is that China is insisting on maintaining a roughly stable exchange rate between the RMB and the U.S. dollar. And I think that's where the inflation problem comes from in China. Mm-hmm. There are really two aspects of that. One is, along with the long-term economic development in China, including growth of real wage rates that you would expect to